I'm an 80s baby. I barely remember the duck and cover drills from the Cold War era. Growing up back then had a large influence in my life. I remember always having a knowledge that over there they didn't have a free press. Here we have a free press. They don't have one over there. Pravda and the USSR and and propaganda, blah blah blah. Part of the journey when you're researching and you're learning for yourself is understanding that pretty much all information that you get comes to you biased. But it wasn't always like it is in the United States now. There is no free press here. We live in 1980s Soviet style press, and we're saturated in this propaganda. And it's very difficult to point out to somebody who's in it that they're in it. It was hard to talk to people in the Soviet Union about Pravda, and it's hard to talk about people in America about CNN. And there's also this begrudging acceptance that you see in the United States, as you did also see in the USSR back then. This idea that everybody in the United States knows CNN is fake news, but half the country still watches them, and all of the country still tolerates them. Never has it been more apparent that we get truncated information. It's been filtered through the screen of the oligarchs than it is when you're watching Sky News Australia. And the issue of the CV in China, they've been ahead of the game. Now, one could hopefully obviously figure out why they're ahead of the game in China. And that's because, as we've talked about China, we've talked about their 40-year plan. The first part of it was to get everybody in China into the Han Chinese mentality. And that's what the Uyghur work camps are all about, trying to get everybody assimilated in the actual country of China to the same ideology. The next step is to annex countries that they consider Chinese countries, like Taiwan and Japan. And after that, they begin annexing countries in their area, and that's Australia. So Australia is a little bit more concerned about this than the United States, even though I think everybody should be equally concerned. So in regards to the CV in China, they've been a lot less tolerant of the propaganda that's been pushed in the United States. And you guys, it's propaganda. And let's be very clear. If the media knows something and doesn't tell you at that moment, and instead whitewashes that information and then slowly tells you a year later, that's propaganda. They don't get to choose when they're going to release the truth. They can't keep coming back and just saying, ooh, whoops, we made a mistake, let's issue a correction. Corrections should not be a habitual part of the news. And if it is, then it should be done during the main time on the news. If the news needs to make a correction, that correction needs to take up front page spot. If the news on the TV needs to make a correction, that correction needs to be done right at the 6 o'clock hour. I promise you, if every correction has to be done during those time slots, they will be few and far between. But they put out this propaganda, they don't care about what they put out, and then they tuck the correction somewhere where they know, somewhere past the 15-second attention span of the United States of America. And they know they can do this because they are doing it, and have been for quite some time. The interesting thing is that a little piece of our truncated internet will still make it through every once in a while, or something like Sky News Australia will still be there as an aberration that they can't quite stomp out completely. But when you sit down and you actually listen to Sky News Australia, it is literally mind-blowing, the things that we've been told in this country.
And Putin, what were your takeouts, and were you concerned about, clearly there are problems with Biden's cognitive issues?
Biden's not a young man, and you can tell. And he gets names wrong, and he stumbles across his words. And he is not the great figure, say, of a Bill Clinton or even a George Herbert Walker Bush. He is not one of those great historical figures.
And it is a disappointment, I think, to have a president like this, Gemma. I mean, you watch those clips and you can't help but watch them over and over again, because it's just so shocking that you have a president who forgets what he's saying and can't get through a sentence, and it's embarrassing.
Listen, it's not that he's not just a statesman, and it's not just that he isn't a great orator. He can't finish his sentences. If that was my mother or any member of my family at that age, I would have them off to see a neurologist or the appropriate doctor to have their cognitive ability assessed. It's not just, oh, he's a little bit forgetful, he's just some goofy kind of, hokey pokey dude on the world stage. The man can't finish a sentence. There's something, and the fact that this isn't being the subject of more robust reporting from the mainstream media in the United States, Shari, shows just how deep their bias is.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we obviously there's a divided media, but this is to ignore problems like that. It is just incomprehensible that it's not even covered by their mainstream media. Aaron?
These people are talking about Joe Biden's performance at the G7. If you watch the CNN coverage of his performance at the G7, you'd have no idea that the reporting has been this horrible from the rest of the world. Now, I'm using Sky News Australia as an example because they are literally the last press that will report honestly on the United States of America. Sky News Australia. But all of the countries were reporting on Biden this way. And the information just wasn't making it into the country. Now, of course, people like myself and other folks like me who pay nothing but attention to news media, comparing international stories to national stories, yes, we all noticed it. But what I'm talking about is I'm noticing an overall lack of an ability for information to make it to American viewers if it's been chosen, if it's been deemed information they don't want it to make it, if it's been deemed information they don't want to allow to get to the American population. It's become very effective. They can hide whatever they want.
Let me bring you back down to earth about Joe Biden. Look, I can't read him. Praise what he said about China just last night. And earlier this year, his first big sit-down interview as president, he also called out the other big autocrat giving the world nightmares right now, Russian President Vladimir Putin, who, among other things, has poisoned some of his critics. I mean, literally poisoned some of his critics. As Biden said, the man's a murderer. But in Europe, where he yesterday met Vladimir Putin, he was asked by journalists, but do you still think he's a killer, right? Check his answer or non-answer. It's like, I don't know, he's waiting for someone to whisper the answer to him through his earpiece.
To answer the first question, I'm laughing too. They actually, well, look, I mean, he has made clear that.
What the hell?
The answer is, I believe he has in the past essentially acknowledged that he was, there are certain things that he would do or did do.
Someone check.
What the heck, you guys? This man is representing the United States of America. Okay, there are really bad people in the world, and those really bad people have really bad plans. And when they see that the person that's driving the United States of America is senile, their really bad plans go into action. The only way this Biden thing is getting through to Americans is in this laughing little, oh, he's just my senile grandfather. This way, Grandpa. That kind of thing. It's not a joke at all. It's not funny. Now, when I covered his inability to speak without reading a teleprompter, and I showed that he used to be able to do such things, this was during the election. This man was showing signs of this. You guys, it's a problem. It's like a real problem. It's not a loving grandfather problem.
So that goes ears. Anyway, that's one change. Here's another. Before the election, when Donald Trump was president, Biden and the media smashed Trump, calling him too soft and Putin, always praising Putin, being in Putin's pocket. But now it's Joe Biden praising Putin. And where's the media criticism of that?
He's bright, he's tough. And I have found that he is as they say, when he used to play ball, a worthy adversary.
Annalise, thanks for your time, but what's changed?
Telling things here is that the Americans have confirmed they won't have a joint press conference after this summit on Wednesday. We've seen in the past that has happened. Donald Trump famously stood side by side with Vladimir Putin in their Helsinki summit, and this is going to be quite a different tone. Joe Biden's going to front reporters on his own. And that's reportedly, despite the request of the Russians, they did want a side-by-side press conference. But
So after Biden's meeting with Putin, the Russians requested that they do a side-by-side interview, and the Biden camp denied it. This is a problem. And the United States media is not reporting on it as a problem. Well, they are. They're reporting on it as a problem that they need to fix, like something that they need to whitewash. I'm hoping to be able to get this information through to people. I'm hoping that this video won't just be deleted and removed and I'll get another strike. I'm on one strike now.
it seems like Joe Biden wants one on his own, and you can read that a few different ways. Joe Biden's critics are saying it's because he couldn't hold up on his own next to Putin, that there would be a tit for tat and he'd likely be bested. But Joe Biden's perspective is that he doesn't want it to be that tit for tat. He doesn't want it to overshadow what the actual summit involves in itself. But this is quite a contentious meeting. He's even facing criticism that he's having it this early in the first place. And so they're obviously trying to keep a lot of different people happy at the same time. And that middle road's a bit tricky to land on when you're right. He has been very critical of Putin in the past, saying he's a killer and then walking that right back.
Well, to go from killer to, as a bright guy and a worthy adversary is rather strange. Now, the media, of course, is all over Donald Trump when he praised Putin. Has it been all over Joe Biden for doing the same?
Yeah, look, it's very interesting watching the coverage of Joe Biden here compared to Donald Trump. There does seem to be that just overwhelming goodwill about how he's approaching everything. And a lot of that has to do with the coronavirus pandemic, that he's taken the heat out of that. One of the interesting comments, too, made by Vladimir Putin in an interview before the summit was about that pursuit of his adversaries, Alexei Navalny, being poisoned, and the potential for him facing some kind of execution, summary or otherwise. But what we've seen Putin say is, hey, you're going after Donald Trump supporters who took part in the January 6th insurrection. Isn't that the same thing? Of course, not many people would agree with that, but there is that kind of tit for tat. So you can see exactly why they're not doing that joint press conference.
You see how even the way that they're treating American citizens who are guilty of trespassing in the Jan 6 event, who have been in solitary confinement for more than 2 months now, that's ammunition on the international stage. And I hate to say this, but Vladimir Putin has a good point.
Joe Biden, the brilliant four-dimensional chess diplomat that he is, sat down with Vladimir Putin in Geneva, and he said, Vlad, can you please pinky swear here that you're not going to hack or otherwise disrupt these 16 bits of crucial infrastructure in the United States? And handed Putin a list. And I'm sure Vladimir said, oh, yes, Joe, very, very sorry. We'll not be attacking your nuclear power systems. We'll not be attacking water grid,
Sky News Australia has every right to joke about this, but we live in the country this man represents. He just handed a list to Putin that said, please, please don't attack these infrastructures. Basically, a targeting list. He handed Putin a targeting list. Ugh.
I mean, what is going on here, guys, with this, Rita?
It's akin to going to a thief and giving them a list of, here's the 16 most valuable things in my house. Can you please not steal those when you break in? Just steal the other stuff. So, one, it's almost giving a license to the Russians to hack the things that aren't on the list, but it's also telling them precisely what is the most crucial things that they can attack and really weaken the country. And we've already seen that earlier this year, where hackers blocked the biggest gas pipeline, and you had major American cities, even entire states, that had gasoline shortages, where people were turning up to petrol stations and they couldn't fill up their cars. This is happening under the Biden administration. If it was happening under Trump, trust me, every Australian would know about it because it would be leading the news. But under Biden, you hardly even got any coverage in this country.
Well, that's right, Rita, but everybody watching needs to watch this because, I've been saying for ages now, Joe Biden, it's just the return of the Carter administration. It's the 70s are back. Gas lines are back. Gas prices are up. Inflation is up. The price of raw materials are going up. This is going to have huge effects in Australia on our economy because, of course, they just kept printing money. And, what happens? Inflation. But the press won't talk about that. Caleb, what did you make of Joe Biden's sit down with Putin?
Well, I thought I was watching a sketch out of Monty Python or something. I could almost see John Cleese, barreling up to Putin. Now, look here, old chap, I understand, you might want to target our pals, but look, we don't terribly mind all that much. But I'll just give you a short list of 16 things that you should not touch under any circumstances. Perfectly fine, we get it, you're going to go on with this, but just don't touch these, we won't have a worry in the world. I mean, seriously, can you imagine any other world leader going to Vladimir Putin or anyone else and saying, look, it's perfectly fine, you're going to carry on with this hacking business, don't worry about that, but here is a list of everything that you could absolutely attack and hurt us, and we will hate you forever, on a piece of paper, all for you. If any other world leader did that, if Trump did that, he would have been pilloried from kingdom come for weeks, absolute weeks. And yet you get Joe Biden standing up and admitting openly, as though he is proud, that he has given this list to Putin of the things that should not under any circumstances be targeted. How stupid is this bloke?
How stupid is this bloke? And the people who have elected him or allowed him to be placed to represent them. We're stuck in a Pravda-esque propaganda bubble. And in the meantime, Australia Sky News is reporting more closely on what's going on with our own president.
When he first arrived in the UK, and I quote, I keep forgetting I'm president. And that was just before he referred to the RAF as the RFA. At one point, Boris Johnson was apparently introducing the newcomers because, like Scott Morrison, South Africa's President Ramaphosa and South Korea's President Moon were also special guests. Boris Johnson introduced Ramaphosa and Moon. Sleepy Joe interrupted, and the President of South Africa, when Boris Johnson had just said his name. Disarmingly, Johnson paused, apparently looked pained, and said, and the President of South Africa, as I said earlier on. Said Biden, oh, yeah, you did. Replied Johnson, I certainly did. Talk about a B team. Donald Trump was right when he said, if I were the leader of these countries, I too would like Biden far better than Trump. Trump said, good luck to Biden in dealing with Putin. Don't fall asleep during the meeting. It seems the only thing the G7 proved was that Western political leaders are totally consumed by woke gesture politics about climate change and other nonsense. The G7 leaders, led by Boris Johnson and Joe Biden, were all about pressuring the other nations into adopting so-called ambitious targets when it comes to net zero emissions. It's the most low-order issue facing the world. When will the West, G7 or G20, wake up? President Xi is not mucking around. This is an expansionist China, so long as, well, its tentacles are so long that soon enough it'll be too hard to rid the Chinese Communist Party from our institutions. Talking about net zero carbon dioxide emissions, that is nonsense.
And I think it's very important to point out that this Sky News Australia, that is seemingly so independent of the Chinese state media, is also what I think is separating it from other news media, allowing it to report on Biden. So there is a connection between the networks who are not reporting the truth on China and the networks who are not reporting the truth on Biden.
Crap. But what else do we expect from a world where Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are the leaders of the United States and de facto leaders of the free world? What else can you expect from a bloke who thought he came into the Senate 120 years ago? Watch this.
We should go back to a position of the filibuster that existed just when I came to the United States Senate 120 years ago.
How the hell can this bloke have any conversation with Boris Johnson, Vladimir Putin, and the Queen when this is his explanation, listen to this, about collecting taxes?
Somewhere between $700 billion and $1.3 trillion.
How much longer will this go on? With those two in charge, Biden and Harris, all we get are Vogue magazine covers, Biden talking about what his favourite ice cream flavour is, and a vice president who's never visited the US-Mexico border to resolve the immigration crisis, even though she says she has. I mean, if you were China's President Xi, would you be laughing?
And this is the brutal honesty from a foreign media. You know, when Fox News went the way of CNN and we all saw that OAN and Newsmax were being presented as the viable alternatives to Fox News, it turns out there is no viable alternative in American media, you guys. And having to go to Australia to find out the truth about our situation, it should explain to everyone where we're at right now. We are the USSR. We are stuck in a Pravda-esque propaganda bubble.
Now, this is coming to a head in the US with a letter that's become public today. It's by a congressman, a Republican congressman by the name of Ronnie Jackson, but he's a physician and a former Navy veteran, and he was actually the chief physician to former President Barack Obama, and he was also physician to Donald Trump.
So did you know that the former physician to Barack Obama and Donald Trump has written a letter about the senility of Joe Biden? Did you know that? Oh, you hadn't heard about that, huh?
People lobbied to get Donald Trump to have a cognitive test because they said he might have been a bit loopy. Well, now Ronnie Jackson is writing. He says, "We write to you today," he's written to the president, "to express concern with your current cognitive state. We believe that regardless of gender, age or political party, all presidents should follow the precedent set by former President Trump to document and demonstrate sound mental abilities." Now, Congressman Jackson then goes on to recite and recount a whole lot of episodes where Joe Biden has seemed very vague, has made mistakes, has shown a distinct lack of mental acuity. One of the ones he highlights, for instance, is one from just over a year ago during the campaign when he completely mucked up the Declaration of Independence that most kids at most American schools would nail from day one.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
Oh yeah, we know the thing, all right. So Joe Biden, he's just returned from his first overseas trip to the G7 and that summit with Vladimir Putin in Geneva. He made plenty of bungles there. I showed you how he got Syria and Libya mixed up a number of times. So this letter, given that it's come from a former physician to two presidents, one Democrat, one Republican, given that he's a man of honour and a veteran from the Navy and that other Congress people are now signing up to this, it's going to put a lot of pressure on Joe Biden to do a cognitive test. This is one that he won't be able to hand off over to the staff. It's one he'd have to do himself.
And he won't have to do the cognitive test because no American media will cover the fact that it needs to be done.
This comes, of course, after President Biden made some more worrying gaffes at the G7 meeting and the NATO meeting, where he was anything but convincing, at times even confusing Syria with Libya.
Strengthening the alliance, make it clear to Putin and to China that Europe and the United States are tight and the G7 is going to move.
Mr. President, do you expect to come out with a vaccine strategy for the world?
I have one and I'll be announcing it.
Do you expect that Putin will be able to work out any kind of understanding with you on the cyber attack?
Who knows?
In case you missed it, last week news broke that Hunter Biden used the N-word multiple times in conversations with his attorney in 2019. The Daily Mail reported that
So Hunter Biden, in his text messages that were on his laptop, is talking to his lawyer, who is another white guy, like he's some kind of gangster rapper. Do you understand? My N-word. Oh, hey, my N-word. I need you to take care of this. If this had been Donald Trump's kid, I mean, I know I'm beating a dead horse here, but we're doing this for a different reason now, because I need to not just show you that it's not being covered here. I need to show you it is being covered at Sky News Australia, and this is what it would look like if the media was being honest.
Messages between Hunter and his lawyer were on Hunter's laptop. Joe Biden's son has repeatedly been at the centre of scandals, with conservative media covering the stories. However, John Voight has called out left-leaning publications for not covering Hunter Biden enough. He says the left, they're okay with slurs. It's okay for Biden's son to use racist slurs, and no one says a word. Not the media, no one. The actor questions why it was okay for the left to harass Donald Trump and his family, but not call out Hunter Biden for using racial slurs.
Now, as you know, there have been thousands of people who have decided to make their way across the US-Mexico border, in part because they think the new sheriff in town is rather soft, and I don't just mean in the brain. The assumption is that the Biden administration is much more open-hearted, much more welcoming to dreamers and any other code names that they give to people who cross the border illegally. You see, in Australia, we know the difference between legal immigration, which most people have either a direct family connection to or all of us understand the value of, but we also have a very hard stance when it comes to illegal immigration. You see, put simply, the number of illegal immigrants who enter any one country make it harder to create spaces for legal immigrants. It's not a crazy concept.
They don't want to leave the place where they grew up, where they speak the language, where they know the culture, the place where they're from, the place that is home. Most people don't want to leave home. My take on it is that we've got to, understanding that, we have to give people some sense of hope.
Whatever that means. Well, fast forward when Kamala Harris ended up being the person who the current President Biden made totally responsible for trying to deal with the problems at the southern border, where thousands of people are literally, among other things, throwing kids over the fences, over the wall with the beautiful little door, to be able to get into the United States. So in her first visit out of the United States as the Vice President and inevitable President, because as if Joe's going to make 4 years, she was in Guatemala today, where the message, well, seemed a little more like John Howard than Bernie Sanders.
I want to be clear to folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border. Do not come. Do not come.
I'm going to come.
Okay, I added that in there. Sorry.
The United States will continue to enforce our laws and secure our border. There are legal methods by which migration can and should occur. But we, as one of our priorities, will discourage illegal migration. And I believe if you come to our border, you will be turned back.
You mean there's a difference between legal and illegal immigration? Who said that?
Now is the time for Congress to show the world that America is committed to ending illegal immigration and putting the ruthless coyotes, cartels, drug dealers, and human traffickers out of business.
That was the speech where, of course, that crazy lady, Nancy Pelosi, tore up that speech, a speech which now reflects exactly what Kamala Harris is now saying to people in Central America. And because at that point she thought she might end up being president, but ended up pulling out of the Democratic primary before a single person had voted, this was Kamala Harris and her reaction at the time. The sourpuss, cat lips, just disgraceful. Oh, it's just racist. And then she would go on to say exactly the same thing. There is a difference between legal and illegal immigration. Let's all say it together. Trump was right.
This is what, if the media was critical of Joe Biden in any way, shape, or form, this is what the news media would look like. I'm not saying I even agree with this guy 100% on his commentary on what's going on. But what I'm telling you is this is missing from our media now. And it's so dangerous that this ideology is not being represented.
Take your questions, and as usual, folks, they gave me a list of the people I'm going to call on. So, Jonathan, Associated Press.
Twitter is mocking Joe Biden.
Okay, now another thing that the rest of the news media is up in arms about, the global media, because of course our domestic media is not reporting on it whatsoever, is the fact that Biden said during his presser that wasn't standing next to Putin. It was his very own presser because he refused to take questions standing next to Putin. He took a predetermined number of questions from predetermined people. And that's all he's ever been able to do. And he fake argues with the people who have already given him the question that they're going to ask him. The whole thing is theater, and we know this on this channel, but the global media got to see it for the first time. And this is Sky News Australia's reaction.
And again, for using a prepared list of reporters to take questions from following his highly anticipated meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin. In the video, you hear the president say, "I'll take your questions," and as usual, folks, they gave me a list of the people I'm going to call on. The admission left Twitter users scratching their heads as they wondered if the president was actually meant to say that out loud. Congressman Greg Steube said, "How is this acceptable?" Special Advisor for Communications for Senator Ted Cruz, Steve Guest, said one word, embarrassing. And a few Twitter users poked fun at Biden's apparent blunder, saying he accidentally said the quiet part loud. And finally, Fox News contributor John Concha took a more serious approach to Biden's comment, arguing it makes the president look weak. He said, Putin presser approaching 1 hour with no signs of stopping. This is what Putin sees as show of confidence and endurance in what appears to be an effort to make Biden look weak/small when he ends up taking relatively few questions from hand-picked reporters before exiting.
Joe Concha is 100% correct. On the international stage, Biden backed out of a dual presser with Putin, where he could have asked Putin in front of everybody about the poisoning of his political rivals, about the funding of all the things that the cyber attacks that Biden accused him of the putting bounties out on American soldiers. Of course, that already turned out to not be true. Biden avoided it because he wouldn't have been able to handle it. He then went to his very own presser and took like 5 questions from 5 CNN reporters and then quickly ran away or was shooed away by his team. In the meantime, President Putin goes out there and has a several hour-long press conference where he takes random questions from random people, and he is doing that to juxtapose what it looks like to have real leadership in the world and to not. And you guys, America is floundering right now without real leadership, and that was very evident at the G7, and nobody knows it because we live under Pravda.
Small when he ends up taking relatively few questions from hand-picked reporters before exiting.
His incoherent fantasies are going to affect all of us. The bloke is reluctant to speak to the media because those managing Biden know that if he goes off message, to put it unkindly, he's hopeless. Last week he conducted his first press conference after 64 days as president, the longest a new president has gone in more than 100 years. How much longer can this go on? He declared a week ago that democracy was under threat. Well, he's right there. Witness our country, where mob rule and the ABC bid to replace the rule of law. But if democracy is under threat, which it is even in our country, that threat's not going to be averted with the leader of the world's democracies, incoherent, having to be propped up physically and intellectually. Now have a look at Biden stumbling a fortnight ago while walking up the steps of Air Force One. Well, look, in many ways, it's quite sad. He stumbles 3 times. Trump talks about media bias and that in relation to Biden, quote, the press protect him. Well, after the stumble, the websites of MSNBC, CBS News, The Washington Post, Los Angeles Times, and The New York Times all had no mention of Biden's stumbling incident. To prove the Trump point when it came to airtime on television, CNN devoted 15 seconds to the incident. But when Trump walked slowly down a ramp after he delivered a graduation address last June, CNN devoted 22 minutes to Trump's walk, the media pushing the line that Trump at 74 was facing serious health questions. This is the same Biden who addressed Kamala Harris as President Harris the other day. The same Biden who, during the presidential campaign, said he was running for the Senate. He was running for the Senate, not the presidency. He said this.
And that is that it used to be required for the filibuster, and I had a card on this.
What the hell does that mean? Not long after that, listen to this.
So the best way to get something done, if it holds near and dear to you that you like to be able to, anyway, we're going to get a lot done.
What? What? I mean, this is the President of the United States of America who's illiterate, incoherent, cognitively deficient, and the leader of the Western world. It is an insult to those who fought for democracy. Well, don't say that Donald Trump didn't warn Americans of this. Taxes will continue to rise. International crises will break out like spot fires. The first is Myanmar. China, sensing American weakness, is in the absolute ascendant. What's next? Hong Kong? Taiwan? The entire South China Sea? And all the while, Biden is escalating debt by pouring trillions into green projects, stumbling upstairs, and basically incoherent. Now, it's one thing to say, wake up, America. I am saying it's time we all woke up.
It's from Biden.
We haven't lived up to it completely, but we've always widened the arc of commitment. I'm not confident of anything. I'm just stating the fact. I caught part of President Putin's press conference. We could work together with Russia, for example, in Libya, or the rebuilding of Syria, of Libya, and for example, in Libya. I beg your pardon?
How are your meetings going here in Cornwall?
Very well.
Come on.
I mean, Alan Jones calls it elder abuse. And I know he gets a laugh from that, but I look at that. He wouldn't survive, James, the Australian press gallery, at least in Canberra. It's a great concern that is the leader of the free world.
But the important thing about this summit is that Joe Biden has already given Putin what he wanted. He took the sanctions off the people involved with the Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline, which is going to allow Putin the ability to hold Europe to ransom for their energy needs. He's already gotten what he wants out of Biden, and that's why Putin, I think, looked so just absolutely bored and nonchalant. And my God, I've got to spend 3 hours with this guy.
We've seen the protests, Corey, probably for the whole time I was in politics. 25 plus years I've seen the posters around claiming that China is harvesting organs, Falun Gong prisoners and other things. I know you're across it out of the parliament. The UN, though, the UN Human Rights Councils, they've just gone out there now and said they've got credible information about organ harvesting of prisoners and Uyghurs, Falun Gong.
Oh, how nice. The UN Council now says that they've got the proof of death camps in China that conspiracy theorists have been reporting on for almost 10 years now. It's kind of getting annoying, all the things coming true, and the fact that everybody just kind of laughs about it. They're like, my conspiracy theory friend was right again. Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? You live in a fake world. You've allowed yourself to be surrounded by propaganda to the point where you think it's funny when you find out that there are death camps in China.
Tibetans, and they're saying they've put China on notice. Surely we should be doing more about this now. And even if we are willing to do something, what sort of power does the UN even have?
Well, the UN has virtually no power. China controls it.
See, anytime that question is asked on a news station, you can judge the news station by the answer. And I'll give you a hint. If they answer with anything other than the UN is powerless, change the channel.
Because it influences all these third world nations that make the votes there. But I think there's a bigger game at work here, Peter.
I interrupted his point there, and I think it's important for me to make sure you guys got that. He's saying that China, through financial incentivism, has gathered together this loose republic of small countries in the UN that are now capable of voting together in quite a large bloc. And China's doing that to try to expand their power, their sphere of influence in the United Nations.
China is snubbing the international rules. It is turning its back on the climate change demands and the Great Reset and all of those things. And I think the UN is simply trying to put some pressure on them to draw them back into the fold and to make sure they conform with what they want to happen. But
so this guy thinks that the UN is releasing this report admitting that China is organ harvesting its prisoners to get back at them because China's not living up to its global warming stipulations. I mean, dude, if this isn't clown world, I don't know what is.
Last year as well. There's help as they're being there to help clear roads, rebuild main streets, and so that the families can get back to their lives. That's what FEMA does every single day.
He began mumbling incoherently. You're not going to hear that in any United States news media source, not Newsmax or OAN. And understand that even Sky News Australia won't cover what's happening in Arizona with that November thing that happened back in 2020. They're not reporting on the report that was released from Fulton County about the same time period, November of 2020. No news media can report on it. It's not just me who's being censored about that topic. They're censoring the real news media just as much as these censoring programs on YouTube.
But there's, there to be, beginning this effort for 2021 is.
Yeah, well, that's a good fear, bub.
Questions about Joe Biden's mental and physical capacity during the presidential campaign. Oh, well, of course, he held it together well enough to win, of course, but the 78-year-old has...
Did he?
And then there was this function where it seemed as though he couldn't recall the name of his Defence Secretary, Lloyd Austin.
I want to thank the former general. I keep calling him general, but the guy who runs that outfit over there. I want to make sure we thank the secretary for all he's done to try to implement what we just talked about, and for recommending these two women for promotion. Thank you all. May God bless you all, and may God protect our troops.
Now, this is not ageist, and with the election done, this is not about any partisan contest either. It's just a legitimate question about whether Biden is up to the job and whether this is good for America and good for the rest of the free world. Let me show you some clips from Fox News this week. It's just a simple matter of looking at how sharp Biden sounded 5 and 10 years ago.
Now they got a new plan. Trust me, it's not going to cost you any more. Folks, follow your instincts on this one.
They put one foot in front of the other. They keep going. That's the unbreakable spirit of the people of America.
Pretty sharp and pretty firm, wasn't he? But during last year's campaign and now in the White House, it's a very different Biden that we're seeing.
We hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created by you know the thing.
I want to thank the former general. I keep calling him general, but the guy who runs that outfit over there. Visit vaccines.gov, vaccines.com, or text your zip code to 438829.
Yeah, the contrast is pretty stark, isn't it? And to be fair, the president does seem to have some days that are better than others. Now, again, this is not an ageist criticism. Some people at Biden's age are as sharp as ever. We all know that. It's just about this man, this president, and how he is aging and how he's coping in the job.
So now that I've shown you that Sky News is the only news agency willing to tackle this on any level, it's time for us to talk about what I really came here to talk to you guys about. And that's about the recent Sky News coverage of the CV origins. I've been waiting to cover this because I was on 2 strikes. And, when you're on 2 strikes, 1 more strike and you're done. You're done, son. So I have 1 strike that ran out as of June 20th. And so I'm comfortable covering this at least in case I get another strike, which I hope I don't. But it's possible just because I'm going over the most recent Sky News report on the origins of the CV. We're going to break this into a 2-part series, and we're going to call this part 1. So part 2 coming right up, guys.